in the chat.
Yes. We will be going till 10:30. Okay, well, let's get started. And Fleur, would you mind taking care of that chat response?
Yeah, sure. I'll monitor chat for now.
Okay, well, let's get started, guys. Good morning and welcome. We appreciate y'all joining in today's KM in the AM learning session. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. And I hope you can take a moment to honor the fact that First Nations and Métis ancestors of this land and affirm our connections with each other. I invite you to share where you're joining us from and your own acknowledgement. Just tell us who you are and what you do in the chat. I mentioned this previously, but please note that this session is being recorded and will be distributed post meeting. If you do not wish to be recorded, keep your video off and change your Zoom name to something generic. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce someone who has had a profound impact on myself and the understanding of research impact and knowledge mobilization. Dr. David Phipps. He's from York University and is a powerhouse in ensuring research doesn't just stay within academia, but makes a real world difference in the communities that we live in. He leads York University's research programs, driving impact both locally and globally. He's internationally recognized as a leader in knowledge mobilization and research impact and has received numerous awards, including the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. He's also been named Canada's most influential knowledge mobilizer. No big deal, right? He doesn't think so because he's very modest. David is also actively involved in committees and networks worldwide. And I should mention that our own KM in the AM Saskatchewan Community of Practice, which brings together researchers, practitioners, and community members to share knowledge mobilization ideas and best practices, borrowed its name from York University's KM in the AM, created by none other than David Phipps himself. Today, we're lucky enough to have him here to show us how to ensure our research makes an impact, and more importantly, how to measure that impact where it truly matters. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. David Phipps, and I'll throw that over to you now, David.
Great. Thank you, Bonnie, for this very kind invitation. Thank you, everyone, for joining early in your morning. Although I know some of you on this call are not on Saskatoon time, you might be on my time or in other time zones. I'm going to share some slides so we can get going. We've got an hour together. I'm very much looking forward to that. Let me get here. Bonnie, let me know when you can see my slides.
We can see them, and if you want to go to full screen.
I think I am, at least I'm full screen on my side.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for the invitation and the welcome. My name is David. My pronouns are he and him. I'm a settler. I was born in England to white parents, and we moved to these lands that some people call Canada when I was 2 years old. I live with my husband in Toronto, and that's on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the current treaty holders of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I am as Bonnie said, the Assistant Vice President for Research Strategy and Impact at York University, and I have the delightful job of being the Network Director for Research Impact Canada, which we'll talk a little bit about, a network of 36 research organizations building institutional capacity for knowledge mobilization. So I got stuff I'm going to talk about in our 60 minutes. Most importantly is we're going to give you a chance to do some breakout groups there. Through my presentation, a little bit of theory. We're going to identify 4 things that you might want, one of which you might want to talk about. So after I presented those 4, I will let you go into breakout groups so you can dig a little bit deeper and then come back and talk about what you talked about in your breakout groups. And then David on the impact hot seat was something that Bonnie suggested. And I guess it's if you've ever had a question but were afraid to ask it then. So just to locate everyone on the same page, a few ideas is, did you know that Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts, and to share in scientific advancement and its benefits? Enjoy the arts and share in scientific advancement and its benefits. Scientific mean writ large to be the STEM sciences, but also social sciences and human sciences, and to advance those and enjoy the benefits. The work that we do is a fundamental human right. Did you know that? So you can go back to your dinner and say, what did you learn at school today? And you can say, I learned that my job helps fulfill a fundamental human right. But also importantly, for these SDGs, many of our institutions and our organizations have a relationship with the SDGs. They are core to the university academic plan at my institution. And we're not going to move the needle on poverty or hunger or well-being or education if we publish, all we do is publish our papers, our book chapters, or produce our artistic outputs. Those are really important. We want you to keep doing those if you're in a university setting, or a hospital or a college, but by collaborating with organizations who are working in these spaces, in these countries, in these regions, we will then be able to help research contribute to no poverty, to contribute to zero hunger, and contribute to the rest of the SDGs. So it's about knowledge mobilization and co-creation and working out within and outside of our research spaces that we will be able to help address sustainable development goals and other frameworks for impacts of research. So thank you to my colleague, Julie Bailey, who says that we generally do research within academia, acknowledging there's lots of community-based research out there. We'll talk about that. But generally, we think about research as happening within academia, but the effects that we are wanting to talk about today are those that are felt outside of academia. Effects on society, the environment, on the economy, on health and culture. And so it is through that black arrow that we are helping research leave the university. And that's what we call knowledge mobilization. And Julie defines research impact as the provable effects or benefits, or hopefully beneficial, of research in the real world. Now, a little sidebar on definitions. Stefan de Jong, a professor at in the Netherlands, he asked ChatGPT to define societal impacts of research, and the ChatGPT came back with 4 paragraphs. They were good 4 paragraphs. They were comprehensive, but Julie does it elegantly in 9 words. So while ChatGPT may be effective, it is not elegant in the way that Julie is. And to illustrate this and adding some context to it, this is work that's underway at York University, where we host the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness, led by Stephen Gates and the Faculty of Education, with a focus on making the shift for youth homeless, shifting from crisis response to either prevention upstream or downstream successful exits, either from school, from child welfare, or from criminal justice, so that you don't exit one situation and exit back into homelessness. So he does his research very successfully. But the Homeless Hub is one way that he gets the research out. So he has a lot of dissemination, not just academic publishing, but turning academic publishing into videos, into whiteboards, into infographics, into clear language writing. He also brings in gray literature and other sources. So the Homeless Hub is his way of getting research out. And then he works with Away Home Canada, a national nonprofit in youth homelessness. And they are the community organization that he listens to. So it's not just pushing research out into community or society. It's about listening to community and society to inform the research. And that creates this positive feedback cycle. And you can see on the top right how his research has contributed to really improving the lives of over 2,000 young people through improved housing, school, improved family connections, or employment. So we really are talking about these provable effects of research from the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness in the real world where these youth are living and working and learning. So now we're on the same page, a little bit of theory. back in 2013, think about what you were doing 11 years ago. I was doing this job. And SSHRC asked me to, if you're not familiar with SSHRC, the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, wanted to evaluate the impact that their knowledge mobilization funding programs had. And so they asked me to sit on a committee to help advise, but I also had a project that was one of the projects being evaluated. And they said, the evaluators at the time said, David, most of the models for knowledge mobilization don't start and they don't end, and they have double-headed arrows and things are spinning. And if it doesn't start and doesn't end, how can we evaluate it? So I created this very uncomplicated model, and lots of things wrong with it, but it's an uncomplicated model that says generally those of us who are on campuses sit in different spaces than air quotes community. And the air quote could be a community organization, an industry partner, government, nonprofit, faith group. And knowledge mobilization are things that we do to bring the community and campus people together in shared spaces. It might be a shared space of knowledge transfer where I've got something and I give it to you. It might be a shared space of knowledge translation where I've got something and I translate it into a format that could be accessible to you. Could be one of knowledge exchange. It could be one of co-production where we're working on something that is meaningful for both of us. And when we create that red arrow, then sometimes impact occurs. And so knowledge mobilization is how we do things, and impact is what we want to have happen. They are not the same thing, and they're not to be used synonymously. They're opposite sides of the same coin. Being knowledge mobilization being something that we do, things that we do to observe an effect on the impact. So for those geeky evaluators in the room, that impact is the dependent variable, and knowledge mobilization is the independent variable. It's the things the interventions we make, the changes we do to a system to observe a change on impact. So we took this very uncomplicated model and created the co-produced pathway to impact, which has double-headed arrows and things that spin, and the back's connected to the front. But that reflects the reality of the messy systems that we work in. And I'll just locate you through the logic of this. And I don't want to spend too much time, but we do research, hopefully co-produced research, and that research is disseminated. And somebody takes it up, if someone or an organization takes it up, and they evaluate it, if it's any good, they're going to use it. They're going to implement that into policies, practices, and services. And those policies, practices, and services have an impact on the lives of your end beneficiaries. And this is underpinned all the way through with engagement with interested groups or interested parties. It is co-produced almost all the way through, but look at the impact line. That comes from your co-production partner, because I say to my researchers, you aren't the ones making the impact because you don't produce product. Industry does. You don't develop policy, government does, and you're generally not delivering social services, community is. And so if we want this impact research to be able to be used to have an impact, then we support co-production throughout the life cycle. I'm going to illustrate this with just one example, is this from Kids Brain Health Network, and that the need, and I'm going to talk about how we evaluated the need, but parents need specialized supports in school. These are parents of kids with neurodevelopmental disorders, and this network works with kids and families who are living with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, with cerebral palsy, and with autism spectrum disorder. The research that was co-produced with Bloorview Kids Rehab, co-produced with early childhood educators, created a program that was delivered in a early childhood education setting, and it's called Social ABCs, and it supported children to be able to make emotional contacts, eye contacts, and then the MCYS is the Ministry of Child and Youth Services, was funding part of this, and they were supporting its development or its delivery in other cities. The dissemination was they published their peer-reviewed journal articles. We helped them develop a parent manual, because this program can be delivered not just in schools, but also at home. To uptake was that the early childhood educators were doing a train the trainer program. And then it was implemented in, as I say, in community settings and also in home settings. And then if you get a chance, Bonnie's going to share the PDF of these slides. Click on this link. It's a global news story of a kid named Alex, who at 30 months old was nonverbal, but at 6 years old, after working with mom and dad and working with teachers with social ABCs, Alex was chatty, and his mom has this wonderful line that it said, Alex said, I love you, for the first time, when we were doing social ABCs. And so it's a lovely story about how this co-produced pathway to impact can be illustrated by this one example. So we're going to use the co-produced pathway to breakout groups. This is where I'm going to start introducing the breakout groups to you. Now, think about what you would like to discuss more. We're going to have one breakout group on co-produced research and planning for knowledge mobilization within your research programs. You're going to have one breakout group on dissemination and what different types of forms of dissemination that you might like to know about. There'll be one on engagement with interested groups and one on actually collecting and communicating the evidence of impact. So I'm going to walk through all of these right now before we put you into your breakout group. So I'm going to pause here to see if there's any questions before I move on to the breakout group descriptions. I'm going to take a drink of my water, and you can unmute yourself and just say, "Hey, David." Hearing none, I'll move on. So co-produced pathway to planning, knowledge mobilization planning. This is an article that we wrote in 2017 about supporting knowledge mobilization and research impact strategies and grant applications. Your knowledge mobilization strategy should have 5 elements. Who are your partners? Who are you working with? Who are your audiences? I put those first because hopefully the goals, number 2, of your research program should be co-produced with your partners, not just pulled out of an academic researcher's head. And then what are the activities you're going to do with your partners to be able to address those goals? How are you going to assess the impact of those activities? And then what's the budget? And don't forget that you've got a space in your budget justification, and you can to be able to use some space. So I say partners and audiences first. Our researchers, my researchers at York University, are pretty good at knowing who they want to work with and who they want to disseminate to. But the goals are often not co-produced. The goals are often what the researcher thinks is important, not necessarily what the partners think is important. They're pretty good on activities, but the knowledge mobilization activities are often what CIHR would call end of grant activities. They're dissemination activities. They're not so focused on the engagement activities or integrated knowledge translation. Everyone sucks at impact assessment, but we've got tools to help you to do that. And if you join that working group, you can discuss about it a little bit more. So that's planning is number 1. And when you're planning, often our grantors, will give you a grant application that says, "Tell me about your partners." Well, partners play more than different roles. Many people are interested parties. They're interested in the work that you're doing. They may not want to work with you, but they're going to have an opinion. They're going to tell you, "Yes, this part of your research is important to me." Those are people we listen to. Your audiences and receptors are people who want to receive the results of your research and do something with it. Those are people we disseminate to. And your co-production partners are the smallest group. They're going to be the people you want to work with, who are going to collaborate with you. So when you're writing your application, when you're talking about your activities, here in number 3, what are the activities you're going to do to listen to parties? What are the activities you're going to do to disseminate to them, to others? And what are the activities you're going to do to co-create, to collaborate with? So it's important that you segment your partners so that you're not treating them all the same as your grant application is asking you to. Co-produced pathway to dissemination. We cannot make, sorry, on my screen, this is in the way, so I can't actually read my words. So you can't make an impact without dissemination. Dissemination is necessary but not sufficient to get to impact. So we encourage you to facilitate the uptake of the evidence that you are disseminating. It's one thing to send it over the fence, but I don't know that anyone's ever going to pick it up. But you need to be able to take that evidence to facilitate the uptake of evidence in the context of its use. I'm going to say that again, and I want you to put your fingers on your keyboard or pick up a pen or a pencil and write down this again. Facilitate the uptake of evidence in the context of its use. That means that you don't just write a policy brief and you don't just put that policy brief on the, you don't just put that policy brief on your website, but you actually take that policy brief into government and you facilitate an uptake by doing a workshop. So we're going to talk about dissemination in one of the breakout groups. And then the last one is about impact. Oh, second last one's about impact It is not easy. If there was an easy button, we'd have one for evaluating impact. It's not easy because in the UK, there's a program called the Research Excellence Framework, and they evaluate 76,000 academic staff were evaluated in their 185,000 research outputs, and they crafted 6,781 impact case studies. I won't go into depth about what happens, but this liberates 2 billion British pounds a year based on your success in research excellence and research impact. And these 6,781 impact case studies are the way that impact is assessed. And it is assessed in that one is compared against another through peer review, and the top ones receive the top marks. But in REF 2021, this is a program that rolls out every sort of 6-7 years, that there were 6,361 impact case studies, and the research by Jonathan Grant showed 5,397 unique pathways to impact. You all should be gobsmacked, as I was, that there's almost no two ways of this getting from research to impact. We start at the beginning every time. So, and then the final one, the co-produced pathway to engagement. This is some work that we did with Kids Brain Health Network when we were looking at the priorities that ended up in being having them invest in the social ABCs. We took about 2 years to do deep engagement with interested parties. We identified 44 needs, and we identified the top 10 needs, and the result was finally the top 7 needs that we used for strategic planning and funding with Kids Brain Health Network. Not going to go through all of these themes, but I can show you here the most votes. We then did an online, if you've done a dotmocracy, it's like a dotmocracy, but it's done online with over 600 respondents. And the number one voted need was training for teachers and staff. So you remember that that's from the social ABCs, that parents identified the need for more and specific training for teachers and staff. And you can see then we've scratched out newly diagnosed adults in supportive housing because the focus of Kids Brain Health Network was on kids, not on adults. So having done identified the need, you've seen this already, parents need specialized supports in school. They also identified number 4, which was 1, 2, 3, more professionals in schools. So similarly, those two identified needs, and based on that, Kids Brain Health Network supported social ABCs, and you can click on the link and see how Alex did on social ABCs. So, quick round of knowledge mobilization theory. Now we're going to ask you to choose a breakout group. I'm actually going to come off presenter mode. I'm going to copy these. I'm going to stop sharing, put them in the chat, and then Bonnie, who's going to help with the with putting people, how people could choose their the breakout group they'd like to go into.
That would be Corey.
Yeah, I'm going to take care of that. I'm just assigning the rooms some names here. I didn't want to do it too soon for worry that maybe people would be suddenly ushered into a breakout room.
Yeah, and people can hopefully elect. Fleur, which questions?
The
yes,
second part of that slide
part.
had the questions, discussion
That-
questions.
That would be important as well. Thank you. I'm glad someone knows my presentation better than I do. And what we can do is put these, if you could copy these down, then you could put them in the chat because we'll lose these screens when we go into the chats. But Corey's going to figure all that out. Well, Corey's figuring all that out. Any questions? Because I know some people on the call and I can call you out. Hamid.
So for the breakout rooms, I think Bonnie and I agreed to like keep notes for 2, but you guys will have to figure out if neither Bonnie or I are in your session, who's doing notes for the session you're in.
Hi, Merle. How are you?
How are you, Bonnie?
I'm good. I'm glad you could join us today.
Yes, me too. I actually, I didn't, I registered and I wanted to come, but normally Wednesday mornings we have a a research meeting, but it got canceled this morning. I'm like,
Yay!
go.
No, that's fantastic. Yeah, but this will all be delivered to you afterwards anyway, except for the breakout sessions aren't going to all be recorded, but that's okay. The note takers will do a report back afterwards, which will be recorded. So you'll be able to access it, come in and out when you need to. Hi, Jim. Hi, Renee. Demute yourselves.
Morning.
Okay, so we're talking about dissemination. Have any of you employed unique ways to disseminate your research, not just at the end of the research, but throughout the whole cycle of the research?
I'm actually a communication specialist, and so that is kind of the only role that I have played on research teams. So, just I've been involved in a couple projects where, we're just frequently through social media or videos or that kind of thing, impact stories throughout the process of the research.
Right, because that's one of the key things we're about in knowledge mobilization. We want to keep our stakeholders and participants engaged throughout the entire process. And so when does it come to you after the research question has already been established, or do you have stakeholders engaged in that, or communities that you're researching? Are they engaged in the development of that research question?
Well, because I work in patient-oriented research, we require that patient partners are part of the research team and have been part of the priorities in developing the research questions. So,
Oh, I bet you get lots of great feedback from patients, though.
yeah, it's very interesting to see how patients impact the research for sure.
And then, of course, your research throughout the process, have you had the opportunity to maybe change your research methodology based on who's part of your study?
Absolutely. Yeah. For example, we just were doing a Delphi survey, and it ended up, after we condensed it, it had 600 questions, and the patient partners, who all suffered with long COVID,
Oh, wow.
they said, we can't get through 600 questions. So basically they had to restart the whole methodology based on that or that feedback from the patients.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I had a situation recently where we had to pull the entire knowledge mobilization and communications plan, scrap it, and restart it. I was working on a project where we were actually targeted by the right-wing political activists in this province. What we were trying to do was engage community and municipal bureaucrats in developing their sustainability plans going forward and how they were doing that. And the right-wing people did not like the language around climate change. So they targeted us. We had to pull everything, including radio and TV ads, and then rethink it and get it approved by the funder more than halfway through the project. So that was a lot of fun. So how about any of you, have you had similar stories where you had to pull your plan and then redeploy a different plan? Or did you, find that halfway through your research that maybe your the knowledge mobilization plan wasn't all that well thought out and needed a little more attention?
Bonnie, I have a slightly different story. So one of the research projects that I'm working on or working with here at the Canadian Centre for Rural and Agricultural Health works with multiple First Nations across Saskatchewan around the connection between housing and health. And so last fall we had a symposium, and one of the things that we did at the symposium, and I don't know if I'm allowed to share my screen, but I'll try. I think it's working.
Yep, it's working.
Maybe. Is it sharing the screen that says built-in procurement policy and governance? Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, so we had FuseLight come. These were graphic recordings of the day, and the morning sessions are on one, the afternoon sessions are on the other. So it really showcased. So she was actually getting the lady who was doing the graphic recording, she was getting notes from all of us. We had table runners that were taking her notes, you know, throughout the day. And then they turned around and they developed the whole thing into a video that can be watched. And that was a really fascinating process because even with that, there were things that afterward were like, okay, but that's, you know, so it was sort of an ongoing and an iterative process, but it developed a really beautiful visual that it really helped us to kind of focus in what community had to say and, you know, and where the research should go. So that's something that I highly recommend, something highly visual that works really well. So that's a good example. But I as a professional research associate working with this particular project, one of the frustrations that I have when it comes to dissemination is that when it comes to things like policy pieces, you need to be in the moment. And so for me, it's there's a big time problem between academia with the peer-reviewed publishing and like all of that is such a hugely long time frame, especially when there's multiple partners involved at the university, let alone with the community as well. And so there's this huge long time frame, but sometimes there are opportunities in the moment where, you know, there was a lot of stuff that came out this past spring around, say, from the federal government, from the Senate reports, and from the national Indigenous groups that talked about the funding differences, right, between, you know, on reserve funding and off reserve funding. So this is an area that we work in quite a lot. And so I wrote a series of op-eds that pulled in some of our research stuff. Well, I couldn't get the researchers, the PIs, to read the stuff and, you know, and you know, add in and edit their 2 cents worth, because that's extremely time sensitive. You need to, in order to get an op-ed into the Globe and Mail, you need to be right in the moment. So I wrote it as quickly as I could, you know, and you know, and tried to help. So to me, it's a hugely frustrating problem, because none of those ever went anywhere. And if a university wants to set itself as an opinion leader, they need to put themselves out there and be an opinion leader.
That's a really good observation, Merle. Did anyone else?
I could add something. I don't know if it fits with the topic, but it's close. So I'm with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada now. I'm not specifically focused on KMB, but have an ongoing interest in it. I worked for almost 20 years at the Ministry of Agriculture in Ontario, and my role in KMB was bigger there. But I recall when I did a secondment and research branch there, and we had a lot of research coming in from the University of Guelph at the end of the research cycle, and you know, the research summaries would come in, and there was a desire to post plain language summaries on an external facing website for people to read it and go, oh, okay, I know what that research project did and I know what they found. But there was kind of a disconnect or roadblock of the people in the ministry wanted to plain language the research results, and there was a difference of opinion as to, you know, the ownership of those results, because the PIs would write the conclusions and the summaries and submit the reports, and you know, some people felt that should not be mucked with, and other people felt that in order to mobilize the knowledge, somebody's got to write it. I think it speaks to the last point about they don't have time to do that KMB all the time. Some profs are really good at it, and some either don't have the time or interest to do it. So who's going to do it is other than the knowledge mobilizers that are probably on this call. So yeah.
Not all knowledge mobilizers, like you stated, are actually connected to universities, right? So some of us are out in the wild, helping community and university and government connect around this work. Now, plain languaging research is a skill, is a distinct skill, and no, ChatGPT and other AIs have not mastered it yet. It still needs a human brain to be there. I've experienced similar things myself, Finnegan, and it's a hard place to be in. But when it comes to research results, right? So, I mean, we can say whatever we want and kind of manipulate the stats to support that argument. But I think with researchers, they come to conclusions and recommendations in an extremely complicated and rigorous manner. And when we have a partner saying that we'd like to adjust what this research says, I mean, it's a hard no, right? Like, government can't make it say what it wants to say. Community can't do that either. And researchers, I think, are usually pretty good at coming to that point. But when you're dealing with that kind of opposition, almost, it makes the entire project and knowledge mobilization extremely difficult. But that's where keeping our partners in the loop right from the beginning, I think we can mitigate some of that. But it's always going to happen. There's always going to be somebody who disagrees with us, right? So
Is there anything I can help with on my tour of the rooms?
we were just talking about research partners and
Good.
their want at times to make the research recommendations and results say what they wanted to say, not what it actually says, right? I don't know if you've had experience there, David,
Well, there is Carol Weiss in the 70s. She was very early in research, and she said there are 3 ways that research can inform use, and we know it's a bit more complicated than this, but in instrumental ways. I've done research, it is used in the way that I said, and now you're making a new widget. So it's instrumental use from A to B. Conceptual use, that research informs your understanding and your belief. And that is the way that we know most research is taken up. And doesn't go from A to B, but it goes A into a setting and changes beliefs. And then there's what's called the political use of research, when someone doesn't say, I want the research to say this, but they say, I've now made my decision. Go find me the evidence to show I'm right. Right. And that would often be in a situation of where a policymaker has already decided what the best policy is. Now policy researchers go out and find me that evidence. So that's called political use of research.
So Finnegan, yours
David.
would have fallen into the political use, I think, your example.
Well, it sounded like the example wasn't so much go find me the evidence. It's I want you to do research I want you to change your research to show I'm right.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that happens quite often. So how do you mitigate that? How do you overcome that sort of hurdle? Because that could be a really big roadblock.
Well, I think you started out by going, when you're talking, by bringing that end user upstream to be able to create trust, because when you're talking with that end user, if I'm a researcher and I'm talking to an end user and the end user starts telling me what they want me to do, then maybe that's not the partner that I need for this research. Now, if I'm not an academic researcher, but maybe I'm a consultant, that's a different role, right? And then that policymaker might be paying me to do the work that the policymaker wants done, but that's not the role of an academic researcher. Although we do know our academic researchers, many of them do paid consulting gigs. But I would say if I put myself in the role of the researcher, by understanding the needs of the community members or the government members or industry members, I'll know if there's alignment between my interests and theirs.
David, I can't let the opportunity go. Many of you probably know the joke of, in government, we say we want to make evidence-based policy making, but often it's policy-based evidence making is what we end up doing, right?
Absolutely, especially if someone says minister is making a speech at 2, please get me the evidence that shows this, right? And that's not the space that Bonnie and I and others are truly working in. I'm going to leave to see the next group and the last group, and I will see you back in maybe 4 minutes.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have to run. Thanks for letting me join in. Have a good day.
Thanks, Finnegan. How about you, Jim or Victoria? Have you guys had any experiences to share?
Yeah, it's been very interesting to listen to different people's experiences and insights. And I was just thinking about, most of the research I do is international. It's not here in Canada. It's mainly in Latin America.
Hmm.
And it's community engaged research. And so that idea of sort of co-producing the goals of research is obviously a key piece that I try to stick to, and certainly encourage my students who are doing thesis research to develop their initial research plans with that in mind. And so, early engagement trips, planning trips are a key feature to sort of set the goals of the research so that it's oriented towards generating information of benefit and use to the communities they're working with. So you do stuff at the beginning, and often you do stuff towards the end. It's the bit in the middle that can be difficult in terms of sort of dissemination throughout. And part of that's driven by, in this context, by time and money,
Right.
or limits to time and money.
Time and money.
So
Yeah,
there's
that's
the sort
always
of the ideal, and then there's always this sort of practical reality, right? And it's something that, so we try and use workshops, let's say, through the process as an opportunity to disseminate ideas and things that are coming out of the research back to our community audience, and to get their feedback to then guide subsequent work, but also how that work then gets interpreted. But these things are always difficult. They're challenging to do logistically. They're challenging to do within time-frames, and from a budget perspective. So that's just a comment on that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's always that sort of ebb and flow in our research projects, or in most research projects, where it's kind of easier to disseminate and keep people engaged than not. And then there's a period of where it's not so easy and problematic.
One of the other things that I think you can take advantage of is technology, in terms of expertise, like things like now there's Canva, so you don't have to be a designer anymore to create infographics or that kind of thing. So that's something that I think is getting better.
Yeah, the specialized knowledge needed to create the products to share that carry our message out into the community are available, and does make it easier. But I'm going to put a caveat on that. I've been working in the AI space for quite some time now with researchers. You still need a certain amount of base knowledge to be able to wield those tools effectively, right? So we can't just take, we can't take our lay summaries, plug them into ChatGPT, and come out with very different products to share with our communities. Unless we have that basic knowledge. So unless we have the knowledge of how to plain language something, or how to create an infographic, and what knowledge to put in, it's more difficult. But for someone who's very involved in the research and has that base knowledge of what the research is about and what you actually want to achieve by using these tools, you need both of that knowledge to work together.
And I would say, as a
it will save you time.
communicator, for myself, it's simplified my job. So instead of having to create something in InDesign, I can now go to Canva, and it takes me half as long. So probably the same thing with everything. Just when you have the right people on your team, it helps to, and not
Sorry.
everyone has that opportunity.
If I may jump in, Bonnie, I have no idea how to get back to the main room and call everyone back.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's time, if you could get us all back into the main room, and maybe send
I
a
will
message to the breakout groups.
Okay, breakout rooms. Close all rooms.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're all back now. David, I will throw it over to you.
Are we all back? Okay, we've got a small group. You sure all the breakout groups are closed? Because then we're missing, people might have bailed, which is fine.
A lot
From
of people
my end,
had
it
to
looks-
leave, but yeah, that's really small session. Corey, are all the rooms closed?
No, from my end, it
Oh.
looks still like impact marketing and impact assessment.
Okay.
It looks like they're just wrapping up. Yeah, here comes everyone.
Okay. Perfect.
Thanks everyone for coming back in. Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie, for figuring out, because I got stuck in breakout room land. I couldn't get back to the main room. So she got me here. So we have 13 minutes left. I have a hard stop at half past the hour. So from the planning room, is anyone here from the planning room, and would you like to just give a 1-minute overview of what you discussed?
Yeah, I was in the planning room. A lot of what we talked about was around how to build trust when working with non-academics, we're working in communities. Hamid in our room has just finished his PhD, and he talked about going to community events. And at first, the first time, people were like, nah, not that receptive to like, anything he was doing around research. But when he went a number of different times and started just focusing more on that, developing relationships with people, then others started introducing him. Oh, this is Hamid. He will, he's doing this, maybe you'd like to talk to him. And he said, then people came to him once they kind of recognized him. And, I think he came in a humble way. And I guess one of the other things we talked about is that you can't rush that, relationship development and that partnership. You have to put a lot of time into it at the beginning. It doesn't always line up with like the research cycle. And, the institutions don't actually always understand how much time that these co-created projects take. But, if you don't put that time in the front, you're always going to struggle with the co-created projects after. So yeah, a lot of discussion around trust. And Miriam shared a couple of tools that she's going to share with the group that maybe we can share around a community partnership checklist and the DORA building blocks for impact that she uses with her faculty and in her job as a research facilitator.
Excellent. I look forward to seeing those as well. Thank you, Flora. Anyone from Flora's group that wishes to add anything? Then let's move on to Bonnie's group on dissemination. Bonnie, how did your group chat?
We had a really great discussion. We started off discussing time to produce the actual products that we wish to share that carry our message into the community, and knowledge around that, and how important it is to have that human brain involved. AI makes it really easy for us to kind of go into worlds that aren't part of our wheelhouse, like plain languaging, like, creating infographics, that sort of thing. But we realize that it takes the human brain to make that stuff great and for people to connect with that. Finnegan, who has had to leave us, he works in government. And he was talking about how when creating plain language summaries, sometimes those can be objected to by some of the partners. And not just with, what the research is about. He was also talking about the results of the research and how sometimes people want to massage the results to say something that is serving their own agendas. And how to mitigate the results of that, if we keep our partners involved and our stakeholders right from developing the question all the way through the research process, that can sometimes be avoided. We talked about sort of the ebb and flow of research, where dissemination can be easier and harder at certain points within the research. And co-producing the goals at the start, not just the knowledge, can help us kind of jump over some of these obstacles that we found out. And and Renee finished up with talking about the technology that's available to us today, where we can actually create the products to disseminate quicker and get our messaging out there faster.
Right.
Does
Thank you,
anyone
Bonnie.
else in the group have anything to add? I hope I got that right.
Amazing. Thanks, Bonnie. And then the third group on impact assessment. Does anyone wish to talk about what you talked about?
Yeah, I took a few notes. I can jump in here. So yeah, three things that I think that stuck out, and challenges, I guess we would be part of it. One is gaining access to collaborators to be able to stay in touch with what is going on in research and how one might do that. And one idea is the idea of planning meetings, where if somebody is involved in coming into those meetings where everyone is involved, including the person doing the knowledge mobilization or responsible for supporting it, then there's an opportunity to meet partners right at the beginning, and that person is brought in as a team member rather than waiting till the end when you're trying to chase down access and you're a stranger to some of the partners. Another thing that came up is the idea that sometimes I guess I would call it institutional culture, and Katya can jump in and let me know if I'm not characterizing this correctly. But when you have partner-driven collaborative projects and knowledge mobilization is naturally built into that, sometimes timelines or differences in maybe the speed at which organizations work or priorities mean that the researcher and the partner may be slightly out of sync. And so particularly if the partner is thinking about that their ideas are evolving as well about what they might be doing, then there is a need to try and do some translation to keep everyone on the same page. And then the final thing would be about the idea of scale, reporting on, say, an individual researcher versus an organization as a whole, and how one goes about collecting across multiple researchers at an organizational level. And Kayla shared a product, sounds like a program or service called Research Fish, where researchers can report on specific impacts, and that is helping to move from quantitative metrics towards qualitative ones, which of course we all need to be doing more of. Yeah, so if anybody wants to add to that or correct me, please do.
What's the program, Graham?
I will let Kayla handle that. Research Fish. I'm as curious as you are.
I feel like if we have tools, we should pop them in the chat and then we can circulate them later.
Yeah, I can share the tool, the Research Fish link. It's a UK-based company. It's owned by Elsevier, and it's huge in the UK. Yeah, Research Fish, all one word. It's kind of an expensive platform. So I work for a research funding organization, and we're implementing it to learn from as kind of complementary to the reporting system currently in place, to ask researchers to report on specific outcomes. I also think it can be kind of like administrative and like potentially I think there's some researchers who don't love it because it's a lot. So we're just starting with it. So I'm not I don't have any what our experience has been yet, but I think some of this will be interviewing as a strategy, interviewing funded researchers, and maybe asking specific questions to help them along in answering that. But it might be more of an interview style if we're not getting them to fill in the information that we're looking for, the impact related data that we're looking for.
Great, thank you for that. I'm just putting another similar tool to Research Fish. Let me just get it here.
David, do you have one that's free or cheap?
Excel. Let me just get this other one. If it's okay, it's not popping up. The other one is the impact tracker from Vertigo Ventures. Let me just put that in. Vertigo Ventures. They have an impact tracker. These are all coming, both of these are coming out of the UK space, where institutions, because they need to make impact case studies for the government's research excellence framework exercise, they needed a system to be able to collect the data, the narrative, media interviews, town halls that I presented at, the minutes of meetings. So the idea is that a researcher would populate their profile on Vertigo Ventures or Research Fish, and then the funder or the institution could get all of this information. The challenge is It's like asking a researcher to update their CV. You know, they'll do that at the end of the year when their performance review comes up, but they're good tools so long as researchers use them as they go along and don't wait to the end of a reporting cycle to start populating their profile. Bonnie, my seat's getting awfully warm. Am I on the hot seat right now?
Yes, you are, and you do it well. You're managing it well, David.
We got a few minutes left.
Yep.
Any
other
any-
questions from folks?
No.
David has a wealth of knowledge behind him.
This isn't a question, but I'm just typing this in the chat, so I'll share it now too, that we did some digital stories with people using the Story Center Canada, where people come and share their stories. David's seen one because I shared it at the AGM. I'm just going to share them in the chat, because if you're thinking about doing short videos with people, the Story Center Canada is an excellent group to work with, and I can certainly link you up with them, or you can do it yourself. So, and there's lots of people that have done digital stories, but Story Center Canada, there's an American, the Story Center, which is much larger, and then the Canada group started out of that, and it's actually reasonably affordable. We paid the Story Center Canada $14,000 to do up to 14 stories. And when we're budgeting a project, because you have to do, bring participants in and all, we usually budget about $25,000, but you get these amazing stories out of it, so that you probably wouldn't get any other way.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Miriam, for sharing those DORA resources. Bonnie, I've got to run. Got to take my mom to a doctor's appointment. But I want to thank everyone. Thank Bonnie and Fleur for the invitation. Thanks, everyone, for participating and all your enthusiasm. And Bonnie, flip me the link and we will amplify this on our channels.
Perfect. Thank you for being here, David. And
Great.
thank you,
Thanks,
everyone who joined us.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Part of what we do here at KM in the AM is not only bring the experts to you, but we want to hear your experience, and that we can learn, so that we can learn better from each other. We've got a wide range of professionals in our membership now, and that's pretty exciting. So if anyone has anything else to add, now's the time to do it. Even if it's a question or something from your experience, please go ahead and do it. Just unmute yourself and jump on in.
Hi. Hi, my name is Victoria. I'm probably the only student in this group. And I've been listening really with a lot of interest, because a lot of this is new to me. So thank you very much for making this happen. And I'm wondering about, like, my research, it can be a little bit paradigm challenging for a lot of people. So I usually encounter like two different reactions, which is like people who are either like completely like defensive and opposed, and those I might not even want to talk to, or other people who are like so on board with it already that they already have like their own understandings of it and so forth. And so the second part can be harmful as well, because that can lead to misunderstandings and misinterpretations of my results. And then I have to keep clarifying things. And like, I'm a little bit concerned about how people, if I disseminate my research results, how people will take the results up, how they will talk about them, and if they will use it to like basically verify things that I did not say. And so like Jim said something about directing how research is taken up. And so I'm just wondering about whether there's any tips or resources or experiences that can be helpful. Thank you.
I think like David talked about developing resources and then doing a workshop to share them. So, but if you're working with like non-academic audiences, kind of earlier on, they will help you all along the way if you have developed those relationships. And, you know, if you have a few people, key people that you can kind of go to, they will help you figure out, you know, what you're wanting to share is going to actually work with the people that you are hoping will use it. So
Another option can be to plan ahead and maybe have focus group session at the end when you will do dissemination already and you want to learn how they perceive your results, to consider focus group.
it's like, that's a great idea. Some of these things are actually so common sense and so simple, but once we get into the research realm, sometimes we forget them.
It seems like that, doesn't it? Because they're so worried about missing something that we don't actually grab onto the stuff that is simple.
Was that helpful, Victoria? Oh, okay. What's your research in?
What I wanted to ask you.
Oh, I'm doing research on intuitive interspecies communication. So it's basically I'm working with animal communicators who are basically performing the role of translator and sometimes mediator between animals and humans. And that is bumping up oftentimes against a lot of perceptions about who animals are, or like what their capacities are, or if this is possible or not. And then on the other hand, there's this huge group of people who are already practicing and applying it in a lot of different contexts, like veterinary care and wildlife rehab and so on. And so I've like 2 or even 3 or 4 like totally different groups when it comes to audiences, and that can be really difficult to navigate when all I want to do is just do descriptive research and be open-minded about the results. And then there are all these groups who are invested in a certain way, and so yeah.
So where is that? Is this at U of S?
It's at UFS,
Are you
University of
working with
Saskatchewan.
Colleen Dell?
No, but I know her. Like, I mean, I think Colleen, I wonder if Colleen was on our SHIRK application. She might have been in our SHIRK application group, but I'm more directly working with Dr. MJ Barrett.
Oh, and where is MJ?
MJ is semi-retired right now, actually. But she's at the School of Environment and Sustainability.
Oh, at Sens. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just wondering about like Colleen might be useful. I mean,
Yeah.
for years, like she's written a paper that one of her, Annabelle, who's since passed away, was an author on the paper, her dog.
Yeah.
And she always talks, she's been very purposeful about like with her Facebook pages and all, is that's the voice of the animals. And I've actually thought about it a lot, because this happens with children too, like where we, voice things for them because we feel like they don't have the capacity to. And it's a very interesting perspective about how to kind of really be purposeful about sharing voices for beings, we'll say, that can't speak in the way that that we would expect, or like the way that you and I can't, I guess. I'm having trouble expressing this. I think I know what I mean. So so interesting. That's fascinating.
Thank you, actually.
Question
That's a
I
really
have,
good reminder.
Victoria. At the end of the dissemination session, you can do online survey. We've done it when we have research retreats. You introduce idea, and then you have simple survey. It's you are getting real feedback, and it might be very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this collective wisdom.
So somebody put a question in, do we have strategies to suggest when research has turned up results that partners do not like? Maybe a discussion. I feel like, yeah, sometimes you'll have, it depends on how you're doing the research. Sometimes, for example, we did it years ago, we did some research with the Kids First program that of the government, which supports very vulnerable women and young children. And the quantitative didn't show a big effect around the program because it was so difficult to show an effect. But when we funded it, the funder provided funding for the quantitative, but the Kids First sites across the province, they wanted qualitative because they wanted to hear the voices of people who had participated. And the qualitative was much easier to see, the impact kind of on an individual or family level. So sometimes it's some of the strategies that you use. And I mean, we certainly talked to them about, the quantitative not showing a big program impact because it was so hard to show. Like there's so many things in the environment that influence what happens with the kids. And a home visiting program will only ever be able to do so much. And it was also very, very hard to develop a comparison group. So some of the methods won't show the kinds of impact that partners might want, but other methods might, or they might explain better what you're seeing in some of these methods. I guess the other
Anyone
thing.
else have any questions?
Sorry, I just thought of one more
Oh.
thing in response to Pat's question is that, a single study is never going to show you everything. Like it's, you have to, with research, you just have to have a body of work. So, so you're going to see different things over time and, that might be helpful too. So. But I would say like the discussion and trying to talk to people at the outset about what you're finding and why you're finding it and what you're seeing. And you might reveal some biases that you have that you didn't, that are hidden that you didn't see. I mean, so much as, how you ask the questions we're starting to talk a lot about bias in AI. Suddenly realizing, oh yeah, because an awful lot of this is focused around, high income, white, maybe male perspectives so things are hidden in these structures. I hope that was a bit helpful, Pat.
Interesting thing
is.
about AI, Fleur, is that it's only as good as the data it's trained on. So if we're in a period where Trump is very popular and lots of people talk about him on the internet, the questions you ask your AI tool will predict the answer based upon that pool of information if it's popular on the internet, because that's where most AI tools are getting their information from.
Yeah.
So yeah, bias is a huge issue. So is transparency when it comes to AI tools. So if you're thinking of using any AI tools, keep those things in mind.
Yeah, Pat, I think you had been wanting to chime in there. Oh, bias of researcher and subjects. Yeah.
Yeah, that the sort of the group self-narrative about what the behavior is or what the experience is versus what's actually being reported by the individuals within the group can be an interesting component of that.
Yeah, I think approaching all of this work with like humility and, putting your ego aside is just so important and can be difficult, especially for academics going through the academic system when that's not the training people are receiving. So anyway, I need to jump off now too. I have another commitment, and I see it's 10:40, so we probably need to wrap anyway.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. Thanks for coming, you guys. This has been a great discussion. And we will do another one again. Watch your inboxes, putting together a schedule that'll take us into 2025. We have a few great speakers coming up. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and if you have any suggestions for speakers or want to speak yourself, we can do that. And we might do some, we haven't really talked about this, but we might do some hybrid sessions again. Like, well, we haven't really done hybrid sessions, but I'm just thinking about, we used to always meet in person at Station 20 West, but I think we have the ability to have some people there in person and then some people to join online. If we host out at Station 20 or somewhere on campus, I know we could get that organized.
Station 20 is a great place to host it. Lots of parking for people.
Yes,
And a great
that's
big
the truth.
room.